Good morning, Shadydale Sunday School class. We trust everyone had a great weekend thus far. We're here to get started on our Sunday School lesson. This is April 18th, 2021, week 7 of our Sunday School. I'm Brother Williams. I'll be teaching our Sunday School lesson on today. And our subject today is Nehemiah, Rebuilding a Nation. I guess some people say, why Brother Nehemiah not teaching this Sunday School lesson, right? Well, just luck of the draw. I get to teach it for him. How about that? Okay, it says, what is our study about today? People are often contemplative before they make major decisions. Nehemiah set out to rebuild Jerusalem's wall after careful consideration, prayer, and surveying the ruins. Okay, the Bible passage will actually be coming from Nehemiah 2:11 through 20. And what topics will we be discussing today? Motivation, leadership, planning, working with others. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at our Bible background. It says Nehemiah was an exiled Jew who rose to prominence in the Persian court. He held the position of cupbearer to the king. This role involved tasting the king's wine before it was served to determine whether the wine had been poisoned. When a report reached Nehemiah about the damaged condition of Jerusalem's wall and gates in his homeland, he took the risk of seeking the Persian king's support to rebuild those damaged areas. The king agreed, and Nehemiah went to Jerusalem armed with the imperial commission to rebuild the walls of the city and determination to motivate the people of God to unite and join in that restoration. Okay, so I think this is a very interesting Sunday school lesson on today, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I have. But if we just kind of back up and look at this Bible background for just a moment here, it said Nehemiah was an exiled Jew who rose to the level to a level in the Persian court. He held the position of cupbearer to the king. Now, this tells us that was a position of honor. He said he rose to prominence. Okay, so he rose to a high position in the Persian court. And the position he held was cupbearer to the king. This role involved tasting the king's wine before it was served to determine whether it had been poisoned. All right, well, that is an important job because the king is the most important person in that particular country. And so you don't want the king to be poisoned. Now, as important as that is, me personally, I don't think I will volunteer for the job. Hey, let me taste your wine to see if it's poisoned before you drink it. Nah, bruh. Oh, my goodness. But anyway, what this tells you is Nehemiah was humble. Okay, that Nehemiah was willing to serve. Okay, and he was willing to be used, and that is important if we are going to be in God's kingdom, be a kingdom worker for God. Okay, all right. So now, one thing we're going to talk about is leaders, okay? And I'm sure we can all think of some leaders. Our Sunday school lesson showed us a couple leaders, Martin Luther King Jr., Winston Churchill, Billy Graham. They were all leaders in their own right. But part of what this is telling us is each of these leaders faced difficult circumstances. So as a leader, whether it's leader of your home, leader of your church, leader of whatever it is, there's going to be difficulties. There's going to be circumstances that come up, and sometimes you might want to give up. But I'm going to encourage you, if you've been given the job of leader, don't give up. All right, lead on. Okay. All right. So that being said, let's go ahead and get into our Sunday school lesson. Let's look at Nehemiah 2, 11 through 16. Okay.
I went to Jerusalem, and after staying there 3 days, I set out during the night with a few others. I had not told anyone what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. There were no mounts with me except the one I was riding on. By night I went out through the valley gate toward the Jackal Well and the Dung Gate, examining the walls of Jerusalem, which had been broken down, and its gates, which had been destroyed by fire. Then I moved on toward the Fountain Gate and the King's Pool, but there was not enough room for my mount to get through. So I went up the valley by night, examining the wall. Finally I turned back and re-entered through the valley gate. The officials did not know where I had gone, or what I was doing, because as yet I had said nothing to the Jews, or the priests, or nobles, or officials, or any others who would be doing the work.
All right. So before we get into the commentary, if you would read the first few verses in Nehemiah, when Nehemiah first got the word about the destruction of his hometown in Jerusalem, it affected him. It affected his consonants, or his personality, the way he carried himself. And the king could tell that it was something wrong with him. And the king said, Nehemiah, you look like you're sick. You look like there's something wrong with you, but you're not sick. What's going on? And so Nehemiah had a good rapport with the king. And so Nehemiah told him that he was sad because he had gotten word of what had happened. The walls have been torn down and burned, and gates and so forth. And so the king was like, well, what do you want me to do about it? And Nehemiah prayed. Okay, that's important. He prayed to God first, and then he turned around and said, well, king, if it pleases the king, I'd like to be able to go rebuild the walls, And so he asked permission first. And so the king gave him permission to go, and asked him, hey, when would you be coming back? You can go, but, I don't want you to stay. I want you coming back, And so Nehemiah said, okay, great. And then Nehemiah went a little bit further and said, okay, look, and this is what a leader does. A leader plans ahead. Okay, a leader looks and understands that there's going to be trials and tribulations. There's going to be roadblocks. There's going to be obstacles. And so they plan for those obstacles. Okay, and so what Nehemiah says, hey, look, king, could you help me out? I need some letters from you. So when I travel, I don't get arrested. I don't get deterred. I don't get sidetracked from my goal. So to other, because I'll be going through other countries. Okay, and then as well, I'm going to need some supplies when I get there. Can I get letters from you so I can get supplies? Right, and so he thought of everything. Right, and then at the same time, part of what the lesson is getting ready to tell us is, and this brings up to the current part of the lesson, right? And so when Nehemiah looked, when he thought about it, he's like, the walls are torn down, the gates, are not in place, and basically the city's walls was its defense against the attack of enemies. And the gates were to be shut at night, or anytime there was a present threat. Okay, and so by the city's walls were also a visible symbol of its pride and strength. Broken walls were demoralizing and a public disgrace. So Nehemiah had boldly asked permission from the king, okay, to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the walls. And this is where the king says he sent letters along with him guaranteeing safe passage and specifying arrangements for Nehemiah to have the building supplies in place and a place to live. Upon arriving in Jerusalem, Nehemiah did not immediately launch. Now, this is important. When he first got to Jerusalem, he didn't immediately launch into his task, but he took time to assess the situation he found. Okay, so he didn't just get there and say, okay, well, let me just rush in and get to work. No, he was some might say cunning or crafting, but he was wise. So first thing he did was took a look at the walls. He wanted to go around and look for himself and see exactly what was going on. Okay, and so he didn't just run and approach other people that he was going to ask to help him, but he carefully considered the circumstances, gathered information, thought about his presence and his plan, and those that was going to work with him. Okay, he made his initial assessment during the night. He did not wish to have eyes, people watching him. So, see, part of what he knew is even though this was something that God wanted him to do, even though he had permission from his king to do it, he had letters in writing saying that this was what was going to happen. He knew there was still going to be opposition. He knew there was still going, in today's terminology, I think the kids might say, he knew there was going to be haters, right? There was going to be people to try to stop him from doing this task. Too often as leaders, when we're on a task, if there's too much trouble, if there's too many obstacles, if there's too many stumbling blocks, we give up. Okay, but Nehemiah, but one of the things that you can do is take an example from Nehemiah. Plan, strategize, understand that they're coming, even think about what they're going to be, and with everything possible, avoid those type of conflicts. Okay, but remember to stay on task and do your task and get your job done. Okay. Um, um, So Nehemiah made a thorough inspection of the condition of the walls of Jerusalem, which had been broken down, and its gates, which had been destroyed by fire. Okay, part of motivating people to take action is demonstrating a clear understanding of the problem to be tackled and forming plans to fit a situation. No doubt, Nehemiah wanted to demonstrate that he knew what he was talking about and began to enlist the help of local Jewish leaders. Okay, now, part of what I see happen too often, leaders will get an idea, bam, and then they just want to take off and present it and run with the idea. Have not thought about all of the consequences, have not thought about all the obstacles, have not planned for those obstacles. Okay, and Nehemiah has given us a great example of, look, plan. Stuff is going to happen. Too often we want to leave stuff to other people. Well, if I'm the leader is supposed to be out front leading. The leader is not in the pack. The leader is ahead of the pack. Okay, and so Nehemiah does a great job here of showing us what real leadership is supposed to be about. Okay, so let's take up at verse 17.
Then I said to them, "You see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace." I also told them about the gracious hand of my God on me, and what the king had said to me. They replied, "Let us start rebuilding." So they began this good work.
All right. His inspection completed and his first-hand information at his fingertips, Nehemiah was ready to make his appeal to the leaders of the Israelites. He pointed out the dangers that those living in Jerusalem might have already recognized. The walls were down. The city is disorganized and in ruins. Having articulated the need Nehemiah proposed a solution. Okay, if the walls were to rebuild, if they were to rebuild the walls, their public disgrace would be removed. Nehemiah bolstered his argument by action for action by declaring that both God and the king were supportive of the work to be done. Nehemiah was without a doubt a skilled organizer and a shrewd observer of human nature. Nevertheless, the he consistently ascribed any success that the plan and activities enjoyed to the grace of God. The response to those, the response to the proposal was positive, so the good work of the rebuilding began. Now, again, Nehemiah, very strategic here. Okay, he stated the obvious. Houston, we have a problem. The walls are down. We're vulnerable. We're disgraced. All of that's happening right now. But guess what? There's good news. We can rebuild the walls. When we do that, will give us the safety that we need. When we do that, we'll reestablish who we are and allow us to be proud people again. Take away, the disgrace. Okay. And then he went on to say, but this is just not Nehemiah saying this. God has sanctioned this. God wants us to do this. This is not just of God, but it's also the king. Okay, so we got God, the king, and you got me, your leader. Okay, that's a new kind of Trinity, not the Trinity, and that's a bad example. I shouldn't try to take anything away from the real Trinity, but basically that's just three backings. Okay, you got Nehemiah, your leader. You got God, who is God. You got the King, who is the King. So you got heaven, earth, and your leader. All right. So once he was able to share this, then they were able to get started on the good work. Okay. So even though you got everything in place, there's still going to be opposition. Let's listen to verse 19 and 20.
But when Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite official, and Geshem the Arab heard about it, they mocked and ridiculed us. What is this you're doing? They asked. Are you rebelling against the king? I answered them by saying, the God of heaven will give us success. We, his servants, will start rebuilding. But as for you, you have no share in Jerusalem or any claim or historic right to it. Nehemiah.
All right. The three men mentioned are opposing the work of Nehemiah. Okay. Their opposition was directly physical, and it took the form of mocking and ridiculing at this point. Although later there would be threats and intimidation, the men were associated with jurisdictions and people that effectively surrounded Jerusalem. In other words, the opposition, in a sense, on all sides. Okay, there was opposition in a sense on all sides. The men made it sound as if Nehemiah's plans were the act of rebellion against the king. In their minds, a restored Jerusalem was a threat. They may have also preferred the locals to passively obey the king and not do anything that might stir up trouble. Nehemiah was confident in what he had planned and declared that the God of heaven would give them success in rebuilding the walls. If the plan was of the Lord, then it was certain to succeed. Nehemiah basically told the opposition that Jerusalem was God's territory. Now that is a blessing. When you know that you know that you know that you know that your plan is of God, when you know that you're not doing this for self, when you know you're not doing this to please somebody else, when you know you're not doing this to keep up with the Joneses, when you know that you're doing this for God, you can have that boldness. And then the people can have that boldness as well. Because, see, once God puts it in your spirit, he'll put it in the people's spirit as well. Okay. And then when people come along and they try to deter you, they say whatever they want to say. You already know, hey, I got permission. God has sent me to do this work. And not only that, in this case, Nehemiah, the king, I got the king's permission and I got God's blessing. I'm doing the work of God, and no weapon formed against me, they will form, shall prosper. And that's the message that I want to give you today. As leaders, when we stay in the will of God, when we know that God is leading us, God is directing us, no weapon formed against us shall prosper. God bless you. I trust you enjoyed the lesson as much as I did. Have a blessed Sunday, and we'll talk to you again in 2 weeks. God bless. Bye-bye.